what can you do when feeding to sleep is the only thing that works? Well, so many parents say to me, yeah, but just feeding them to sleep is the only way. It's the only way my child will settle to sleep. It's with a feed. It's going to be the only thing that works until it stops. So what's happened here is this child, this baby, has got used to being fed to sleep, so much so that when you've tried something else, they've gone no and protested hard because they're going, that's not what we do. Give me the good stuff. I want the milk, because that's what they know and that's what they expect. And they've probably rejected all your other attempts at soothing them and settling them until you've gone, okay then, well, feeding is the only way, and you've gone and you've fed them, and that thus proved the point that feeding is the only way, and reinforced that to the little one that they need the feed to fall asleep. And so it continues, and you get stuck on this hamster wheel, and people say to me, yeah, I get that, but how do I get out of it? How do I stop that? So I'm going to take you through 5 steps that you can take to move away from feeding to sleep, and find a new way so that feeding isn't the only thing that works. The first step is to identify hunger. When your baby is feeding, is it hunger or is it comfort? If they're in the younger age bracket, you know, in the first 6 to 12 months even, it could be, 0 to 12 months. So in the first few months, they're bound to have night hunger, of course. Once they reach 4, 5, 6 months, it's a grey area. Some still have hunger in the night, some don't. In that last half of the first year, the 6 to 12 months, it's less common that there is nighttime hunger. It can happen. Some babies are hungry. It depends on so many factors, you know, and their health, their calorie intake, their weight gain. It's loads of factors. So it can be really challenging, really from the fourth, 5th month, 6 months, right through to closer to a year. It can be really tricky to know whether there's hunger there or not. And you'll be able to identify that, and you may even have a good idea already that, yeah, it's just comfort, or is it hunger? Is the daytime appetite affected? If so, then they're probably getting too much in the night. So try and identify that hunger first. If we're talking about a little one, definitely older than a year, but usually from 6 months, if everything else is in check, they're gaining weight nicely, they're in good health, you've had the all clear from your healthcare professionals, and you have no suspicion that there is actually any hunger in the night, then the chances are there really isn't any hunger in the night, and it is just being used as comfort. It's gonna happen in the early few months, so if you're actually talking about a baby that's just a few months old or in the very early stages, then it's okay. And if you are feeding them to sleep, don't worry, don't beat yourself up about it. Just be aware that you're gonna need to work on some of these steps around 4, 5, 6 months, and start being aware by then and getting clear on it. So identify the hunger. If you're, let's now assume that we're talking about older ones where you're sure that it's not hunger. You're looking at, they wake up and they're not really interested in feeding, they maybe don't want breakfast, you've got enough evidence to suggest, yeah, they're getting too much in the night, that those night feeds are definitely hunger. Then you're gonna need to work on stopping the night feeds. And with younger babies, you can wean night feeding, and that's a whole nother episode. We can talk about weaning the night feeds. But what we're addressing here today is when you feel like feeding your baby or toddler is the only way to get them back to sleep, like you feel like nothing else works, but you've identified the difference between hunger and comfort, and you're sure that it's not hunger, okay? So from here on out, we're going to assume that we're talking about a child that isn't hungry and that is definitely comfort feeding. So now we've got that clear, everything I say from here on is based on that assumption, okay? So step 2 is to decide on a suitable response instead of the feeding. So don't just take it away and go, I don't know what I'm going to do, but we'll just try anything. Get a plan in place and decide on what that response looks like. Now, at first, if you're, for instance, going to respond with A very common one is the shushing and patting. If your response is going to be that, it's nice and soothing. If you're going to do that, fine. But just be aware that your baby or toddler is likely to push you away, brush you off, cry or get irritated and appear to not like it. And this again is another reason why parents often go, nothing else works. It won't work unless you persist. But at first they're likely to go, no, don't want that. You might even find that you pick them up for a cuddle and try to calm them and soothe them, and they're just irritated. This is because they want the feed. The baby wants the feed. They want the good stuff, and they're trying to communicate that to you by saying, no, none of this is good enough. What are you trying to fob me off with? I want the good stuff. So whilst that's great, they're communicating that to you, you know at this point that's a want. It's not a need. That's the difference. So your little one's telling you, I want that, but you're saying, I know you want it, but it's because you don't know how else to get to sleep. So trust me, you don't need it, but I appreciate that you want it and that you don't know what to do otherwise. So we're going to recognise that this is a little one who's using it to get to sleep and doesn't know what to do, doesn't know how to put themselves to sleep without it. So you need to give that some, with some weight, and we need to understand that and help and guide and show that child how to put themselves to sleep without the milk, because they don't know how. It's a learned skill. So if you're gonna sit with them and you're gonna soothe them, shushing, patting, pick up to calm, put back down, and I strongly recommend doing that all in a very calm tone. I recommend that you minimal interaction, try and be intermittent with it, so you don't pat them off to sleep, but you offer a little bit and then you ease back. So you're reassuring and you're there. And just for example, say that's what you're going to do. Step 3 is to see it through without caving in for as long as it takes. And again, I want to reiterate, this is all under the assumption that we are certain that there's no hunger. So we've already ruled out hunger. We've decided it's definitely just comfort that they're feeding for. Okay, so in that situation, you're gonna see it through, whatever your response. It might not be that. It may look different to that. It may be more of a regulated response where you come in, reassure, go back out, come back a bit later. Whatever your plan is, see it through without caving for as long as it takes. At bedtime, for as long as it takes. When they wake in the night and you go back, you do the same thing for as long as it takes. Now, the reason why, because some people say to me, so how long would you give it before you just go and give them the milk? No! Don't give in and give them the milk at all, because if you do, I'd rather you didn't even begin. I'd rather you just gave them the milk and live with it. Because if you're gonna take action and you're gonna stop doing that, you need to see it through. If you hold out, if you try and you're soothing and you're reassuring and you've been at it an hour and then you go, I can't take it anymore, I'm sure that there's got to be something up, I'm just going to get the milk. And you give them the milk and you feed them. You've just taught that child to hold out a long time, to be very resilient and strong-willed, and that if they cry long enough, they cry hard enough, they make a big enough fuss, whatever it is they're doing, that they will get the milk. And you've just taught them that you will give it to them. That it takes a certain amount from them before you will, but that you will. And if you reinforce that belief in them, they're gonna keep going, and that you're just gonna it's like creating a monster. You're gonna create a very strong-willed child, and it's gonna make it twice as hard for you the next time that you go to them, or the next bedtime. You're just gonna build yourself a bigger mountain to climb. So don't even begin unless you can really commit to seeing it through. Now, in the instance where if you decided that there was hunger in there, then that would be a whole different rule book. So if you were you know, if you were going about this kind of plan, you got so far through and then you actually went, no, I really think my child actually is hungry, what do I do? The sleep nanny said see it through as long as it takes, but you know, this doesn't apply. What I'm telling you today doesn't apply if you suspect hunger. If you suspect hunger, there's a whole different rule book for that. And you need to work on weaning the night feeds first and then removing the feed as a crutch. This is purely about comfort feeds. So I can't stress that enough. I don't want people stuffing their babies at night because I said so. I'm not telling you that. You absolutely, if you have a hungry baby, you feed a hungry baby. This is purely based on the assumption that we're talking about comfort feeds, and first step was to identify that and be sure on that. So step 1, identify the hunger. Step 2, decide on a suitable response. And then step 3 is seeing it through as long as it takes. Now, once you've done that a few times, you've seen it through as long as it takes, that child is going to get better and better at resettling, self-settling. They're going to recognise that response because you're consistent with it, you're doing it every single time. They're going to go through those motions, get more and more practiced at it, and they're going to start to settle quicker and better. And that's just brilliant because they're really developing the skill that they really, really need. So the practice really does make perfect. If they resist your reassurance, if they're pushing it away, if they're not interested in anything but the golden stuff that they really, really want, that's when you need to persist, keep going, still offer it, even if the reassurance, continue to offer that reassurance, continue to do what you're doing, because at some point they'll go, oh, actually, this is quite nice, I do like it. And they will accept what you are offering once they realise nothing else is going to be offered. As human beings, we do not continue with behaviours that don't serve us. We just don't. So there will come a point where they go, okay, well, I'm not going to get that anymore. And then they're very quickly going to forget that anyway. And they will get better and better. And you're doing a wonderful thing in helping your baby or toddler learn how to put themselves to sleep. So it's what they want. They want to be asleep. They just don't know how to get there. And they've been using that feed because it's what they're used to and it's what you keep doing. So it's time for a change. Step 4 is to respond consistently every single time. So I want utter consistency. Whilst I said you see it through for as long as it takes, see what through? See that consistent response through. So the response you put in, step 2, decide on a suitable response, see it through for as long as it takes, and then make sure it's consistent. So the exposure to the thing that you're doing at bedtime that your child sees, goes through, experiences and learns from is repeated every waking. So that they're seeing the exact same thing every time. If they get that from you at bedtime and then at 1 or 2 wakings in the night, but then at the 3rd waking you feed them, or at the 3rd waking you just bring them into your bed, or something different happens, again, they're going to think, yeah, there's this other outcome that I can get, so I'm just going to hold out for it. And what you want to do is make it very clear that it's the same every single time. And if you do that, you're going to get results faster. That child is going to feel safe and secure. They know where they stand because it's recognizable. They're not confused. They're not wondering. You've made it very clear. It can feel quite rigid when from your perspective as a parent, but from a baby's perspective, they just love that clarity. You're not giving them mixed messages or confused ideas. It's very clear, and they'll slip into a nice rhythm like that, which is brilliant for them. Okay, so be absolutely consistent with that response every single time that you respond to a waking. And then my 5th step for you in this is give at least a week to 10 days of super consistency. I mean, no one-offs at all. Every single bedtime and night waking has been met with the exact same response every single time. If you're still struggling, then you can question whether that works or not, and whether you need to change the response, whether your response needs an adjustment somewhere. But you need to give it a good week to 10 days. There's no point in going, okay, one night I did that and it didn't really work. It won't work that quickly. It needs time. You know, habits take time to form, they take time to get rid of and to bring in new ones, so give it time. But it won't take too long. When they're little, they're like sponges, they adapt very quickly, they're very mouldable. But yeah, don't just throw in the towel after a few days. It needs time to set in. Okay, so I'm going to round up for you. Your step 1 is to identify any hunger, because we want to rule out hunger first before we go any further. If you're certain that it's comfort feeding and that you're finding no other way of resettling your child other than using comfort feeds, and you're certain it's not hunger, proceed to step 2, which is decide on a suitable response. Something I can help with, and something that you can read my book, and I'll go through lots of options in there, so you'll find the right way for you. Get that response, get it planned, know what you're doing. Step 3, see it through. Once you know what you're doing, and that's why it helps, you've got to know what you're doing, because you can't see it through if you're going to second guess yourself and question yourself every few minutes, especially when you're tired and it's the middle of the night. The brain does crazy things, so get clear, get sure, then see it through, as long as it takes. Step 4 is to respond with utter consistency. Make sure that it's consistent every single time. And then step 5, give it some time. Be super consistent. If after a week you're thinking, yeah, well, there was this one time I did that, and there was this one night that we weren't actually home in time for bed, that's not consistent. So you need a week of at least, every bedtime and night waking being met the same way before you adjust something. So there you go. What to do when you feel like feeding is the only thing that works, the only way to get your child to sleep, even though you know they're not hungry anymore. 5 steps there to change things and get them sleeping soundly.